A Long Island native who was 7 years old in 1969. That year, there were two major events in his life that happened that would change his life forever. One was a group of underdogs did the impossible. The amazing Mets won their first World Series. That was his team, and I have to admit it's my team too. And earlier that year, there was another first. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin emerged from Apollo 11 and were the first people to set foot on the moon. And I'm going to let my guest tell us which of those events was more influential on his life. His new book, Spaceman, An Astronaut's Unlikely Journey to Unlock the Secrets of the Universe, written by former astronaut Mike Massimino, tells us how he went from the suburbs of Long Island to being part of the two shuttle missions that repaired the Hubble Space Telescope. And it was a bit of a bumpy, sometimes scary journey. Mike, welcome to Science Friday. Welcome back.
It's great to be back, and it's great to see you again.
I never realized that we grew up a block from one another. Went to the same high school.
Where did you go to elementary school? Did you go to John Street?
I did. I went to John Street.
That's right. I went John Street School, and we made the same walk. What were you close to Hempstead Turnpike or away from it?
I was 4 blocks.
Oh, have your listeners stopped listening already? You were 4 blocks in. I was right by the turnpike.
So you buy a library and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, right by Lincoln Road Library, and it's supposed to rename the street after me, apparently.
You get that?
It might be a gag, but that's what they're planning to do in a couple weeks here, so I'm excited about that.
And you had Joe Fontana for math, I understand.
Joe Fontana for math, in 11th grade. And Mr. Sforza in 12th grade, and I can remember all of them, back in Cary High School.
Well, now that we bored the whole audience.
Yes, now that they're all stopped listening, let's talk about going to Pat's Farm for vegetables. Go ahead.
Well, one thing I did see when I was over at the Intrepid Sea Air and Space Museum,
yes,
I saw home plate from Shea Stadium that you brought into space on the shuttle.
I did, yep. I'm a huge Mets fan, as you say, and I'm glad you forgot the question you said you were going to ask me, because I don't want to answer it. It's a tie between the two, between the Mets winning the World Series and Neil Armstrong walking on the moon. But the advantage to Neil Armstrong.
Oh, yeah. How did you get the plate up on the
shuttle? I wanted to fly something. I flew a Jersey the first flight, and then I wanted to fly something. They were closing Shea Stadium down in 2008, which is when we were supposed to launch, but we ended up launching in 2009. And a friend of mine was flying dirt for the New York Yankees, because they were also closing down Yankee Stadium.
You can't let that happen.
No, well, dirt from the pitcher's mound. So I called up my friends at the Mets, and I said, "Did you hear about this guy flying dirt for the Yankees?" And he said, "Yeah, Mike, we can do better than dirt. How about home plate?" I was like, "Send it on."
Wow.
Yep. So that's how it happened.
Wow. And you wanted to be an astronaut since you were a kid, right? Since
I was 6 years old. I ran around the corner from you when those guys were on the moon. I went outside in the backyard and looked up and imagined that there were people there, and it struck me that it was the most important thing going on, and it was the most important thing that was going to happen in hundreds of years. It grabbed my soul, it grabbed my heart, and it never let go.
And it was not an easy journey.
No, it wasn't. No, our neighborhood, we didn't see many astronauts walking around it. Did you? I didn't see anybody.
A lot of ice cream trucks.
Yeah, ice cream trucks you had to chase. But I kind of forgot about that dream. It just seemed impossible. It was like growing up to be Spider-Man, which I mentioned in my book. It was just something I couldn't imagine happening, and I gave up on it. I didn't think about it very much until after college, and then after college, I started thinking about more and more about what was really my passion in life. And the Mets, by that point, playing for the Mets was not a possibility. That became pretty evident in about the 7th grade. But I started thinking about maybe if I couldn't become an astronaut, why not do something to help the space program, and maybe try to become an astronaut. Those things I could do, at least try. And so that's what I decided to do.
And you talk about discover. One of the things I can relate to also in your book is about your fear of heights.
Yes, I don't like heights at all.
Going into space with a fear of heights. How do you overcome that?
Well, but really, a fear of heights is like looking over the ledge. Looking over a ledge and you get the urge maybe to something's going to happen, and but it's your mind playing tricks on you, sort of. I mean, but not really, because if you jumped, you'd get hurt, right? Or if you fell, you'd get hurt. But it's a reference to that distance below you, a couple stories, maybe looking over a handrail that that gives you free space like that. That's a danger. In space, like in an airplane, I don't know if you do, but I don't feel a problem looking over out of the window of an airplane or outside of the cockpit. It's fine. And there are many fighter pilots I've met with the same thing, or at least one I know very well, a fighter pilot, test pilot, astronaut commander, a shuttle commander, who is more fearful than I am of heights, but fine with jumping out of an airplane, fine with flying an airplane. And in space, it's the same thing. Your relative distance of the Earth is so far that you don't feel, I didn't feel like I was going to fall.
Right.
So I was fine with that. But I am really afraid of heights. I am not a thrill seeker at all. I'm the opposite of a thrill seeker.
When I was taking flying lessons, the first 500 feet was the worst part.
There you go. Right. When you got the perspective.
Once you get up in
Once
the
you get up there, right? Altitude is your friend, but that's also a safety precaution. Right. Altitude is your friend. Power, altitude. Don't forget that when you're flying.
No, not forgetting that. You became an astronaut, but you were rejected 3 times because of your eyes.
Yeah, I couldn't see neither. That was another thing. You know,
details.
Yes, I couldn't see. Yeah, that was another problem.
But you didn't let that get to you.
No,
you were going to find a way around.
Well, it disappointed me, you know, and sometimes things become inconvenient. Let's put it that way. There are inconveniences. It would have been a lot easier if I was able to pass that eye test. But even so, even if I could pass the eye test, I didn't know that I would ever get selected because it's still so competitive to get there. There's so many good qualified people in so few spots. Mm-hmm. But what happened to me is the first 2 times I pretty much got an outright rejection from NASA in the first selections, a couple years in between. A few years after that, they were looking for astronauts again. I got an interview. And during the interview, they test your medical situation from head to toe, and including an eye exam. And I failed the eye exam and was medically disqualified. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, you know, what am I going to do? Am I just going to accept that? Or am I going to, even if I could rectify it somehow, which seemed impossible, still no guarantees of anything. Yeah. But before it could even be considered again, I had to do that. So I went through some vision training to improve my eyes so I could see better. And it worked.
Wow. Do you think that that stick-to-itiveness is what helped you? They noticed that you weren't going to take no for an answer?
I don't know. I don't know if that was it or not, but certainly perseverance doesn't hurt. And I don't know if they notice it. I think they probably see that in a lot of people. Mm. But I think that certainly is one thing. Is, you know, I think it's really important to be resilient in life, no matter what you want to do. And that's why I think it's important to do something that you really love, because the thought of being able to do something you really love, even if it's impossible, and I thought being an astronaut was impossible for many reasons, just the sheer odds against it, even if I had a clean bill of health and everything was good. But because I wanted it so much, I realized when I started pursuing it, I realized that it was the perfect job for me. It was the greatest job ever invented. And I also realized that it was impossible to get this job. It was going to be really difficult because I needed to apply, and there was so many people that wanted to do it that the odds were so stacked against me it was impossible. But I also knew that the odds would be 0 if I didn't try. Mm-hmm. And I had to give it a shot. And it was, in some ways, it was easy to continue. It would have been much harder for me to give up. I could not stand the thought of giving up.
Mm-hmm. Well, you had the right stuff. I want to explain. You were on 2 missions to fix the Hubble Space Telescope, and on one of these, you ran into a problem where there was a strip bolt.
Yes.
And of course, that's frustrating when you're in the driveway.
Right.
But what's it like up there in space? Did you use the brute force method that we do in the car?
That's what we ended up doing, yes. In fact, I learned that lesson, Ira, on that street, right around the corner from you on Commonwealth Street. My Uncle Frank lived right across the street.
Yeah.
And he was, I remember I was about 10 years old throwing the ball against the stoop, like we used to do back then.
Stoop ball.
Yep. And he comes over covered in oil, and he talks to my father. He goes, "Where's your father?" And I go, "He's in the house." He goes in there, and they come back out with a gigantic screwdriver. My father grew up on a farm, and he had these tools from the farm. I guess it was a tractor screwdriver that was like 3 feet long. It was the biggest screwdriver I've ever seen in my life. And he goes, my father says to me, unknowingly how this was going to help me later on in life, "Come across the street with me. Maybe you'll learn something," right? So I go across the street, and the Ford Torino has the hood open. There's oil everywhere, and my uncle's covered with grease, and they hammer this big screwdriver to get leverage. This is a science show, after all, right? So he gets some leverage. He hammers this thing into the oil filter. My father steps aside, and my uncle yanks on it and says things that I can't repeat on your show now, and he finally gets it to break. And the solution they gave me to remove that handrail that I describe in detail in the book, but the short of it is that the suggestion was, let's see if Mike can just rip this thing off. And floating, 350 miles above the Earth, working on this billion-dollar telescope, all this high-tech stuff, the thought that went through my head was, this one's for you, Uncle Frank. Going right back there to Franklin Square out on the street, And I just gave it a couple tugs and yank, it came right off, just like that oil filter came loose.
Wow, that is a good
That's
practice.
it.
Yeah, you use what you know.
Pay attention, kids. You never know what you might learn. 40 years later or so, it came in handy for me.
You also say in your book that all that training can't prepare you for the emotions you feel in space. That when there's something I'm not supposed to see. You were saying.
The Earth. There are no words. Words do not exist to describe the beauty of what your eyes see when you're in space. They just don't exist. Awesome, beautiful. So there's no way to do that. So I try to describe it in the book, and when I talk about it, as the emotions of what was going through my mind. And when I really looked at it from the spacewalk, from Hubble, the altitude at Hubble, 100 miles higher than the station, you see the curve of the planet. And when I had time to look from the spacewalk, where you're not confined by the window, you can look anywhere you want. You can see the curvature of the Earth, and it's so magnificent. My initial reaction was, this is a secret. Humans are not supposed to see it. It's more beautiful. It's more beautiful than human eyes can handle. I cannot handle it.
It's like a spiritual moment.
It was spiritual, and then I started getting a little overwhelmed and started to tear up, which was going to cause another problem. Water in the spacesuit is not a good idea either. So I had to get myself under control. And then the third time I looked, and this is all within moments. I looked and I thought to myself, the thought that went through my mind was, if you were in heaven, this is the view from heaven. This is the view from heaven. And then I was like, no. It's more beautiful than that. This is what heaven must look like.
Yeah.
I really felt like I was looking into heaven, looking into paradise. That was the emotion I had that words really can't describe, but that's the emotion I was going through at that time.
In my end of the block, we call that verklempt.
All right.
Now, I know you were close to the crew that was on the 2003 Columbia shuttle that didn't make it back. Did that change your view at all about going into space?
As far as like the danger, no.
Yeah.
It really didn't. It was amazing, actually, because I was kind of wondering how I would react to something like that if it happened. You never really think about it. But after it happened, it really didn't add any new information, Ira. It was just like we knew this could happen. There's going to be space accidents, and there's going to be more of them. We haven't seen the last of them. This is dangerous business, and we're going to see more in the future. We don't know when that is, and hopefully it'll never happen, but the likelihood is there. And it really didn't add anything. It was very sad. It made me think about, losing my friends. It was the worst day of my life, losing my 7 friends that one day. And then the other part of it was we started thinking what happens to our space program? Yeah. We also lost our spaceship. So it was a time of grief and a time of a bit of confusion, but it also gave us the resolve to continue. We were not going to give up. And we figured out a way to keep flying the shuttle. We figured out a way to go back to Hubble, finish building the space station, service the Hubble Space Telescope one more time, do that without incident, put the shuttles in museums where they are now.
Talking with Mike Massimino, who is an astronaut and author of Spaceman, an Astronaut's Unlikely Journey to Unlock the Secrets of the Universe, from Science Friday on PRI Public Radio International. Did you know how good a writer you were when you were in Cary High School? That you were writing, this is a greatly written, very nice.
Some of my teachers always thought I was a pretty good English student, but I also had help on this. I had Tanner Colby. I had a co-writer with me, and a very good editor at Crown, Kevin Doughton. I've always been good. I think the advantage I had is I've been good at telling stories, and I can remember almost everything. I really can.
It's hard to judge that you like to tell stories.
I love telling stories, and I love sharing it, and so it was a good mix because Tanner was good at listening and formulating the story, and then I was pretty good at adding to it, I think, and then when we got to the editing stage, we had a very good editor. So my strength was more in the storytelling, I think, and my memory.
Are you going to do a John Glenn and go back up into space?
I would love to, but that was John Glenn. It wasn't Mike. That's a little bit. We're on now, right? Are we talking again? Okay, sorry. All right. I thought we took a break there for a minute.
No.
That was John Glenn. Okay. I don't think they're going to make an exception for me. But I'd love to go back.
You probably spent more time in space than John Glenn.
I have spent more time in space, but let me tell you something, Ira. That's John Glenn. Okay, he wrote a blurb in the back of my book.
All right, but you know how you could top that? You could go to Mars, right?
Yeah, but I don't know if they'll be okay, Mike. We've had enough of you. No, I would love to go back. I think that I in my mind, I think I will go back. I cannot stand the thought of not going back. It's not going to. NASA has young younger people, but actually not younger. Some of my friends are still older than I am who are going. But I, that chapter is closed, and I'm happy with the way it happened for me at NASA. But looking forward, I think these commercial companies, these private companies, pose great opportunities for people to experience spaceflight, and I hope I get a chance maybe to travel that one last time. I cannot live on this planet without thinking I'm not going to get another chance to leave it, and so I hope other people that want to go feel the same way, because I think there's going to be opportunities.
You would not take a one-way trip?
No, I'm not going. No. I'm coming back. When I got my travel orders, it's a government operation, NASA, and when you go somewhere, wherever it is, we would get travelers from Houston, Texas, to Baltimore, Maryland, and return. That was our travel orders for that trip, let's say. And we got them at the Kennedy Space Center. They handed them out to us from Kennedy Space Center, Florida, to low Earth orbit and return. And I was really happy to see and return in those travel orders. I wanted to come back, and that's what I would feel the same way with another trip.
Last question. There's so few astronauts now left. You had a large class. There are only like 8? Well,
there's more than 8. There was 8 in the latest class.
Yes.
But no, they still have probably around 50 or so active astronauts. In the shuttle days, we were up around 140 total. The latest class was only 8, but I think the future classes are going to grow. As we get the capability with these private companies to send more people into space, it's going to be not just private citizens, it's going to be astronauts. I think that number is going to go up.
And for all the budding astronauts out there, what's the one message you have to tell them?
Whether you're a budding astronaut, a budding scientist, engineer, teacher, radio host, whatever it is, do what's passionate to you. Do what's important to you. Be honest with yourself. And if it seems like it's impossible, remember my story, okay? Remember my story. It was impossible. It can happen. Don't give up. Give it a try. And that, I think, is the best thing you can do to lead a happy life.
And it's a great story. And if you want to read it, it's called Spaceman, An Astronaut's Unlikely Journey to Unlock the Secrets of the Universe, Mike Massimino. Once an astronaut, never a former astronaut.
Always you get above 50 miles, you're an astronaut. Don't let anybody take that away from you, kids.
There you go. All you X-15 pilots can hear that.
That's it. That's right.
So thank you, Mike. Stay with